let's get to it. It's Saturday. I want to get this done. The important thing here is that this is done. Really happy with the way that things are moving along. So anyways, guys, stay tuned. So that said, let's hit the intro screen. Another day has passed. I don't know if you guys can ever like pick up on how long and how gray looking my beard gets in terms of the timelines of some of these videos. I was going to shave this morning, but I'm going to save it for tomorrow. I stopped by Byron's yesterday. I got the oil line all crimped up. You can see there's some pretty nice, super high pressure fittings. I had no idea. I thought that he had like a big like clamping device, like some Jaws of Life type shit. And this was actually all hydraulically pressed and crimped on there. So I don't think we're ever going to have to worry about this little old oil feed line for the blower having any issues going forward. So we've got that, and I'll get that installed. I got to get the fittings up in there with the T-fitting, and then we'll get the oil pressure sensor going. And hopefully that'll be all good. I'm glad there's actually quite a bit on this pigtail here. For whatever reason, this being a foxbody kit, the plug right here, like, and I've run this according, like, I'm pretty sure this is how you would have this run, because your coolant temp sensor is here, which plumbs in here, and this isn't really long enough. But if I reconnect this accordingly on the length of that pigtail, I think I'm gonna have just enough wire to get it down there. But back to the fuel line. So got some overnight parts from Amazon. This Evil Energy stuff, like, it's like crack on Amazon in terms of fuel filters and line and everything else. And despite the fact that I've got this hot rod fuel hose kit here, well, I wasn't gonna wait for shipments from Canada to get what I need, especially with a long weekend and everything else. So I've got my 6AN for PTFE size hose fittings here, which means I can go ahead and get this line made up, which is the one that's gonna go from there to the regulator. And then I'm also gonna be able to terminate the end of the line that is left, so that one can get routed to the back. We got our main one for our main feed that'll get routed to the front there. So with that said, I'm just gonna get busy making some line, do some test fitting. The other thing that you wanna make sure of is, you can mock everything up, make sure that it works, but before you run fuel through any of your lines, and same thing especially for this oil line that I done, blow compressed air through it first. Just make sure that any debris, dirt, maybe little metal filings from when you're cutting the metal line. You never know what's going into the line when all of this stuff is happening. So make sure you blow it out with compressed air, get any of the shit out, so that way you don't clog an injector or get stuff in your oil that you don't want if it's an oil line, so on and so forth. So let's get to it. It's Saturday. I want to get this done so that I feel like the top end of things is taken care of. And then we can run the rest of the fuel line, get into some wiring, and hopefully fire this thing up. And just to point this out, guys, got this little tool here for the vise, and your fittings fit in here in these claws and hold things like so. These are the plastic ones. I would get the metal ones or aluminum, whatever is available, because you actually got to put quite a bit of pressure when you're locking these things down. You can even get a fancy wrench like this. I usually end up using this wrench and the other proper size wrench and locking this down under the line. That's just what I do. But you guys can watch tons of how-to videos on this shit online. You don't need me to show you how people have done it time and time again. So let's get some work done, feel like we've accomplished something, and then we can relax. So I got all my fuel lines done. The short piece was the hardest one to deal with, probably just because of, well, just being short, rigid, and a little bit of pain in the ass, but I got it in the end. So starting over here, you can see here's my Y block, and I got it tucked up nicely against here with the AC bracket holder. So I'm hoping that I'll come up with something here to kind of hold that down out of the way. And it's actually going to be rotated down just a hair, just enough so that something like that. That's going to allow me to get my main feed on here. Main feed's going to come through this hole in the back. So that's going to have this nice and clean here. I know some guys mount their regulators back here. However, I didn't want to have to drill. I didn't want to have to deal with a whole bunch of 90s and tons of hoses in this specific area. So I opted that I'm just going to do the main feed there. Goes off the Y into the back of this rail, then into the back of this rail. So there's our two main feeds coming in. Then on the return, so some guys, they will run a union, kind of like factory, between the two rails, and then they'll just run one return line. And I opted against that. I've got a return coming off this rail right here. And then on this side, the return's actually coming off down here. They've got a nice little fitting there, and that is to give the right clearance for the distributor here. You can see how you can actually rotate it, and it actually fits down in here the way that it should, which is very nice. So that return line's coming down here. You can see both of them here, looping down underneath the blower. And these two lines with the blue checks here. So I'll get them all nicely tied together into each side of the regulator. And then we'll of course get our vacuum line off here. So this is gonna have to run to our vacuum system. So we'll get a nice line run and routed over accordingly. And then the main return is on the bottom here. So it's gonna go out the inner fender, and then it'll meet up with the main line, and then we'll route those main lines going back. But the important thing here is that this is done. I can actually plug the injectors back on, or the harness for the injectors back on. I've gone ahead and extended this guy. I just have to get a little bit more loom here so I can extend that loom down. Now this will be long enough to get to the pressure gauge, and got the oil feed line on for the blower here. Just need my hose clamps on for the radiator hoses. And that'll be pretty much it. I'll be able to get the intakes bolted on. And this is actually gonna start looking like a complete motor. I'm not gonna worry about the AC lines until the very end. So that way, just in case the intake needs to come off or need to be able to troubleshoot, just don't need a bunch of stuff necessarily in the way. One other thing, I'll probably fire the car up on the 2-wire idle air control valve, even though I've got the 4-wire conversion unit over there. We'll see. So we've got options coming along nicely here, and the next step's really going to be going through the Holley wiring and getting that all ready so that we can pretty much prime the oil pump up. We need to get our fuel tank in and delivering fuel to the front, and we'll be in a position to hit that key. So stay tuned. Guys, so I'm getting the intake manifold ready here, and you can see I've got a can of brake clean. And even though the manifold looks really clean, you can see that somebody's done a lot of polish work here. And one thing about polishing, powder coating, anything, painting even, you never know what overspray, foreign material, potential debris, and everything else could be living in there. And what if I told you guys I know somebody that went through 3 freshly rebuilt motors as a result of a poorly powder coated intake? I have a story about that. I'm gonna save that for another video. However, you wanna make sure you get this, your lower intake, anything that's allowing stuff to go into your motor And I know this is like trivial, right? It's just like, oh, it's a decorative piece, and some people don't care. Sometimes they have stuff laying on the shelves, and you could have a mud dauber that built a nest in there. You could have dust and dirt. Maybe you're in a sandy, dusty area, and there's a bunch of literal dirt that's blowing into the intake. So compressed air is great, but flush out, ream out, wipe out, do whatever you got to do to make sure that you know 100% that that is crystal clean on the inside before you install it. Well, nothing like playing musical cars by yourself, especially when not all the cars start, run, drive, and move on their own. With that said, I've got the Saleen 89-421 car sitting in the lift area here because it's finally time to put this car up for the first time. And it's time to get the fuel tank, fuel pump, fuel filter, and braided fuel lines, PTFE-8 and 6. Run to the front as we got all of our fuel system taken care of in the engine bay for the most part. We got the upper intake manifold on, started mocking up the main charge pipe here, and need a smaller coupler for down here. Gonna need to get the blow off valving sorted out, and I need to get a fitting for the Anderson pipe going in so I can get that all connected. But we're coming along really nicely under here. Really happy with the way that things are moving along now that we got over all of those major hurdles in the beginning of having to pull the motor out and pull the dash out, do all those types of things. Hoping to fire this thing up for the first time by the end of this week. So, Calypso moved over there, a couple things moved around, took the M5 out for a nice drive. I actually thought my evaporator core might have been gone in it. Kind of had like that weird little smell, almost like a barn. So either I had a mouse in the car and it's gone because the smell isn't there anymore, or just something, maybe it just leaked a little bit and then it sealed itself back up. I have no idea. But needless to say, the AC is still working great, which is good to know on a hot summer Texas day like today. So anyways, guys, stay tuned. We're gonna get this thing up in the air.